Hey guys, my name is Nick. This is going to be my YouTube channel. It's mainly going to be revolving around Yu-Gi-Oh content related to the FA, or Formula Athlete, archetype in the game. FAs is one of my favorite decks in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I just love the playstyle and the artwork. It reminds me a lot of F-Zero, which was an old game on Nintendo that came out that I used to love playing as a kid. And as a result of that, I just wanted to pick up the deck and play it ever since. This is going to be a deck profile on the FA Metalfoes deck that I took to my locals last week and actually took second place, beating decks like Salamangreat and Dragon Link. It was pretty wild. It is still a casual deck though. I'm not going to say that this is going to top a YCS or anything, but I just wanted to share this profile with you guys. That way you knew what I was playing, and just so I can get myself out there as well. So feel free to have a seat, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. We're going to start off with the FA cards first. So, starting out, we're playing 3 copies of FA Auto Navigator. Auto Navigator is the bread and butter of this strategy. She is a Wind Machine Tuner, level 1. When she's normal or special summoned, she lets you add an FA field spell from the deck to your hand. There are several field spells in this archetype that we're going to be getting into once we get to the spells. She's extremely important to the strategy. If Auto Navigator didn't exist, FA wouldn't even be a deck that I would be interested in playing whatsoever. She literally takes this deck to the next level. Her secondary effect is, if she's in your hand or graveyard, you can target an FA monster whose level is higher than its original level, special summon this card, and if you do, reduce the targeted monster's level to its original, and then her level becomes the amount reduced. So not only is she a terraforming on legs, but she's also a special summoning extender that can modulate levels as well. She's just an insane card all the way around. Definitely playing 3 copies of Auto Navigator, no matter what kind of FA deck you're building. Next, just 2 copies of FA Hang on Mach. You could play 3. However, I do feel at 3 it gets kind of bricky. You don't really want to see too many copies of this card. Plus, with all the searchability that the deck has, you're able to access this whenever you need it. This card is probably the second best main deck FA in the entire archetype, in my opinion, monster-wise, just because its effects are pretty good. It's a Wind Machine, level 4. It gains 300 attack times its level. So when it's normal summoned initially, it's only 1200, which isn't that good, obviously, but it gets better. Each time an FA spell trap or an FA spell trap effect is activated, this card gains 1 level. Now that is an optional effect, it's not mandatory, so you choose if you want to do that or not. But he gains a level and it sticks. So each time you're activating FA spells or traps, he's gaining levels, getting more attack, and just getting overall bigger to deal with. He's unaffected by monster effects of any monster who is level or rank is lower than his current level. So as he gets bigger, he becomes immune to monster effects of anything that's lower than him, which is pretty good. And then when he's level 7 or higher, he actually, any card sent to your opponent's graveyard gets banished instead. So he becomes a macrocosmos on legs, basically. Just an insane card. It has so many crazy effects. This card already alone hoses so many meta strategies. Things like Eldritch, Zodiac, Shadal's, they really fall to a card like this because they literally cannot play when you have this guy at level 7 or higher. So he's just really important, and I play 2 copies of it. Now, the last main deck monster FA I play is actually FA Dark Dragster. Dark Dragster's cool as a 1-of. It's also kind of like an extender. What it does is it can special summon itself from your hand if you control an FA monster who's level 7 or higher. It's pretty cool, and then what it can do is its individual effect is it can target any card on the field, including cards on your own board, and just reduce its level by 3, and then destroy those cards. He also gains 1 level each time an FA spell, trap, or effect's activated, and then he gains 300 attack times his level. So he can also get pretty big. He's a really cool extender, and can also pop your field spells to get you pluses, or pop any cards on your opponent's board before you go ahead and commit to your plays, which is nice. So it's pretty cool as a 1-of. You could technically play 2 of it, but given, again, how much search power you have in this deck, I think at 1 is fine, because you always have access to this when you need it. that was the last main deck FA monster. We're going to be diving into the FA spell cards now. Going into the field spells, I played 2 copies of UA Hyperstadium. UA Hyperstadium is cool because it's actually always treated as an FA card, no matter where it is. Also, what this card does on activation, it lets you add an FA monster from your deck to the hand. So it actually is a Rota for the archetype, which the archetype needed tremendously. Because you could argue that the other field spells were Rotas when they were destroyed. But again, you had to kind of jump through hoops to destroy them. Like, there wasn't anything easy that you could do without having like multiple cards in hand to be able to pop them. So having just a card that, when it's activated, gets you a search immediately is a big plus. It gets you access to things like Auto Nav, your Hang on Mach, or your Dark Dragster, which is nice, and that's why I'm obviously playing just 1 and 2 of these, respectively. So this card is cool when it's activated. And then the secondary effect is you can reveal a field spell in your hand, pay 1,000 life points, and if you do, you can normal summon an FA monster from your hand in addition to your normal summoner set this turn, even if this card leaves the field. That's an insane card. It's literally a field spell that is a Rota on activation and grants you a double summon effect. Insane. The only thing that would make this card better is if it had an effect when it was destroyed, just like the other field spells do. But again, I guess that's asking for too much, so I just played 2 copies of it. Again, you don't really want to play 3 because it is bricky since it's a hard once per turn on activation. And then with all the searchability you have in this deck, you have access to this when you need it, so I feel like 2 is the proper number. Next up is 1 copy of FA Circuit Grand Prix. Circuit Grand Prix, in my opinion, is probably the worst out of the field spells. And you'd probably read this card and wonder why that's the case, because you'd read this and think, oh, the effect's pretty good. Well, in a vacuum it is, but this card doesn't really do anything for your FA monsters during the main phase, which is the phase that's most important to you, since that's the phase that you're going to be synchro summoning most of your cards and making a lot of your combo plays an extension. Granted, it does give them levels during the battle phase, which is nice because it helps them beat over stuff that would usually be a problem to get over, but that's kind of negligible because, you know, this being like a pseudo combo deck, you want to be able to combo on your main phase. You don't want to like have to go into battle phase to gain levels and then go to main phase 2 and make your plays. You want to make your plays in main phase 1, and unfortunately this card doesn't allow your FAs to get there. So it's fine as a one-of. You search it when you need it. It does come up every now and then, but in my opinion, it's probably the worst of those field spells. Oh, and then also, I'm sorry, when it's destroyed by battle or card effect, it lets you, or I'm sorry, when it's destroyed by a card effect, whether it's your own effect or your opponent's, you get to search an FA card from deck to hand. Now, moving forward, the rest of the FA field spells I'm going to showcase all have that same graveyard effect, and that's actually why I'm playing Metalfoes in this strategy, because the Metalfoes cards really boost the deck's consistency when you use the Metalfoes pendulum effects to blow up the field spells, which is nice. Next up is 2 copies of FA Off-Road Grand Prix. Again, this card is fine as a 2-of. You don't really need any more than that since you can search it whenever you need it. Its effect on activation is during the main phase, and that's either player's main phase. It gives your FA monsters 2 levels, which is nice. So like, for example, if you normal summon to Hang on Mach, it's level 4. You activate this field spell. In the main phase, it gives him 2 levels, so he jumps to level 6. And then because you activated an FA spell, Hang on Mach's individual effect can activate to give him an additional level, which puts him to 7. Which basically gets his entire effect online, which is crazy. Because you'd read this and think, oh, isn't it hard to get him to level 7? It's really not. You activate 1 field spell and he's already there. So that's pretty nice. In addition to that, giving them 2 levels in the main phase, if an FA monster I control is destroyed by battle, your opponent has to discard a random card from the hand. Now that doesn't come up very often, and to be honest, it is kind of situational, but a lot of players in Yu-Gi-Oh! Tend to not read cards, and they'll make their plays and do things. So it's kind of nice, like when they attack into a defense position auto nav or something, thinking that, like, you know, they're just going to get rid of it, I get to rip a card out of their hand, which is cool. And that is treated as an FA effect activation, so if I have any other FA monsters on field, they will gain levels, which is nice. And then again, the last effect is if it's destroyed by a card effect and sent... Well, it doesn't even have to be sent to grave. It's just if it's destroyed by a card effect, I get to search any FA card from deck to hand except a copy of itself. So again, all the field spells in this deck, like Circuit, Off-Road, and the next field spell, which I'm playing 3 of, City, all have effects when they're destroyed, and they float into any FA card except themselves. Which brings me to the next field spell that I'm running, is 3 copies of the best field spell in the archetype, FA City Grand Prix. City Grand Prix is kind of like a combination between Off-Road Grand Prix and Circuit Grand Prix, because it gives your FA monsters 2 levels during the main phase as well as the battle phase. So it's almost like combining these 2 effects into 1 card, which is nice. So not only does it give you the levels you need in the main phase, it also even gives you the levels in the battle phase, which is cool too. Secondly, this card has another effect where when it's on the field, your opponent cannot target your FA monsters with card effects, which makes them really difficult to deal with because there's so many cards in this format and game that do target. Things like Dogmatic of Punishment targets. Things like, Infinite Impermanence, Effect Veiler, Dino Wrestler Pankratops, to name a few. Even Zodiac Dryden, for example, targets. There's a lot of targeting effects in this game. If you have City Grand Prix out, they literally cannot target your FA monsters with anything. So that's really good protection. And then again, if it's destroyed by a card effect, you can search for any FA card from deck to hand except a copy of itself. So this is the best field spell in the deck. You're playing 3 of this no matter what build of FA you're running. Then next up is 1 copy of FA Pit Stop. This is one of the quick plays that you're playing. I'm only playing 1 of it just because, again, you don't really need that many copies, and they're hard ones for turns anyway, so if you open multiple, it feels kind of bad. What this one does is you can target an FA monster on the field, reduce its level by 2, and then you draw card from your deck up to the number of FA Pit Stops you have engraved plus 1. So even though I'm only playing 1 copy of this, when you activate it, you have no copies engraved. You still get to draw 1 card though, because it's as many copies as you have plus 1. So it's literally just a draw 1. And then because you activated an FA spell, the FA gains 1 level back. So it's almost like they're only losing 1 level. They don't really lose the 2. But it's also nice for the level modulation to be able to bring them down a level if you're trying to make a certain synchro play, which is cool. And then it also has a graveyard effect, which unfortunately you can't use during the same turn it's sent to the grave, which kind of sucks, but whatever. You can banish this card from the graveyard, and it becomes a monster reborn for your FA monsters that are in grave. So you banish this from grave, target an FA monster in your graveyard, and you can special summon it, which is nice. So having it as a 1-of is pretty good. Next up is 2 copies of FA Test Run, which is the second quick play spell you're playing in the deck. Test Run is awesome. The only reason why I don't play 3 of it is, again, because it's a hard one to return on activation, and you don't really want to brick on it. And again, with all the search power that this deck has, with popping the field spells, you're able to access this card whenever you need it. Playing 2 of it is fine. What it does on field is you can target an FA monster you control, change its battle position, and then you can destroy 1 card on the field. That destruction on field is non-targeting. The only thing that this card targets is the FA monster at activation, but the card you're destroying is not targeted. So it actually gets around cards that can't be targeted, which is nice, and it keeps your opponent guessing because they don't know what you're going to be going after when you activate this, which is nice. The grave effect on this card, again, similar restriction to Pit Stop. The grave effect can't be used in the same turn that it's sent to grave. But what it is, it's kind of like a Zodiac Barrage, where you banish this card from your graveyard, target a card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon an FA monster from your deck. So you can banish this card from the graveyard to pop a field spell, special summon a card like Autonav from your deck, and then what's going to happen is the field spell that you blew up triggers its search effect, and then Autonav triggers on normal or special. So you go +2 off of this exchange, which is pretty insane. So 2 copies of Test Run is a really awesome card. Good disruption. It's like a pseudo extender on top of it. It's just really good. It's an insane card. So that wraps up the FA portion of the deck. Like I said, this is really all you need, just in terms of monsters. Triple Autonav, double Hang on Mach, 1 Dark, and then the spell lineup was just, the 2 Test Run, the 1 Pit Stop, triple City, 2 Off-Road, 1 Circuit, and then double Hyper Stadium. It seems like a small package, but that's really all you need. It gives you access to a lot of different things and cool synchro plays, which we'll get into shortly. But for right now, let me show you the second half of the deck, which is the Metalfoes portion of it, and then you're going to kind of see how this all comes together. So let me grab these Metalfoes cards, and let's go into that section of the deck. We're going to start off with 2 copies of Raremetalfoes Bismugear. Bismugear is really cool. Not only is it a high scale for you being a scale of 8, it's a level 1 fire psychic monster, and I'm going to just get straight into it. Basically, why I'm playing Metalfoes is because these cards are all pseudo ancient fairy dragons for the deck. since Ancient Fairy Dragon is banned, unfortunately, these cards kind of fill that role that Ancient Fairy Dragon played back when I was playing Ancient Fairy Dragon in this deck and it was legal. What this card does, and what all the Pendulum Metalfoes monsters share, is their scale effects, and that is, once per turn, you can target one other face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, you can set a Metalfoes spell/trap directly from your deck to the field. Every single Metalfoes monster in the archetype, with the exception of like a handful, have the exact same pendulum effect, and this is mainly what you're doing to combo off into your plays. You're going to activate a Metalfoes card in the scale, target a field spell, destroy it. You're going to set a Metalfoes spell trap from your deck to the board off of the scale effect, and then because the field spell is popped, you get to search off the field spell. So it's like a +1 every time. It's really, really nice. So 2 copies of Bismugear is good, and then the monster effect is, if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, during the end phase of that turn, you get to add a Metalfoes monster from deck to hand. And that effect even triggers if this card is destroyed in the pen zone as a scale. When it goes face up to the extra deck on destruction, its monster effect triggers, and then at the end phase you get to add a Metalfoes card from deck to hand. Next up is 2 copies of Metalfoes Steelen. Again, it's just another high scale. It's being an 8. It's a vanilla monster, so it has no monster effect. Level 2, Fire Psychic, and then its scale effect is the exact same as Bismugear's, where you target another card you control, destroy it, and then you just go super plus. So 2 copies of him. 2 copies of Metalfoes Silverd. Now this is your first low scale in the deck, scale of 1. Again, it's another vanilla monster, so it doesn't have any effects, which is fine. And it's level 3, Fire Psychic, and its scale effect is the exact same as Steelen's and Bismugear, where you target another card you control, destroy it, and then you just go plus. Next up, 2 copies of Parametalfoes Melcaster. Melcaster is actually one of the newer Metalfoes cards from the most recent core set, Blazing Vortex. This card's really cool. It's a level 7, Fire Psychic, also another low scale, being a scale of 1. Its pendulum effect is identical to the last 3 Metalfoes cards I showed you. Target a card on the board, destroy it, and go plus. However, it does have a monster effect, and that effect is kind of like the reverse version of Bismugear, where if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can add a Metalfoes card that's in your extra deck face up to your hand. However, you cannot activate cards with that same name for the rest of the turn. So it's kind of like the reverse version of Bismugear, where when Bismugear is popped, at the end phase it lets you add from deck to hand. Well, when this gets popped, it lets you add a face-up Metalfoes card from the extra deck to your hand. But that's immediately on activation. It's not an end phase effect like Bismugear is. But it's still pretty cool to have as a 2 of. This also has pretty good stats too. The defense is pretty high, so that's good. Then you play 1 copy of Metalfoes Vanisher. Vanisher is an interesting one. Initially, I actually wasn't playing this card, and I was kind of foolish for not, because it's really good. That's why I'm playing it at 1 now. The scale effect never comes up. You never want to put this card in the scale, ever. I mean, unless you're in a pinch, it's a 1 scale, which is fine, it's a low scale, but the actual pendulum effect itself, you rarely use, like, if at all. And what that is if a monster you control is destroyed by a card effect, you basically get to add a Metalfoes card from the graveyard to your hand. To be honest, I'm sure in pure Metalfoes it's fine, but in this hybrid F.A version, you're never using this pend effect, the scale effect. What you're using, like 90% of the time, is going to be the monster effect, and that monster effect's pretty good. It's while this card is in your hand, you can target 2 face-up cards you control, including a Metalfoes monster, and destroy them both, and then special summon this card from the hand. He has a level 9 Fire Psychic, so it's kind of funny because you actually can't pendulum summon this card even in pure Metalfoes, because there's no 9 scale Metalfoes. So that's actually why this card has a self-summoning effect. But it is pretty good, because if you have a card like Melcaster, for example, and a field spell, and this is in your hand, you can trigger the effect to target the Melcaster and the field spell, destroy them both, and then you get to special this card. Melcaster triggers its grave effect. If you have a Metalfoes in the extra deck, it adds to your hand, and then the field spell triggers because it was destroyed. So this card is really nice. It's also 2,900. It's huge. And then when it's special summoned by the effect of a Metalfoes card, including its own effect, you get to target a monster your opponent controls or have in their grave, and you banish it. So this card's really, really nice. There's actually a really cool way that you can special summon it from the deck too, and we'll get into that once I get into the traps, but it's a really cool card to play at 1. Next up is the Metalfoes spells, and I'm only playing 2 of them. First one is Parametalfoes Fusion. Again, this is another new support card from the Blazing Vortex set. It's a fusion spell, lets you fusion summon any Metalfoes Fusion monster from the extra deck, using monsters from either the hand, the field, or face up from the extra deck, which is pretty nice. The only downside of this card is you need to use one monster, not one monster from each, but like you can't use 2 monsters on field or 2 in your hand or 2 in the extra deck. It has to be like one or the other. So like if you have a monster in the extra deck and a monster on field, then you can use 1 and 1 to fuse. Or if you have a monster in hand and a monster on field, you use 1 and 1. Like you can't use 2 Metalfoes in hand or 2 on field or 2. It's a little weird. It would be a little bit better if the card could do that, but it can't. But it's still pretty nice, especially since you can use at least 1 Metalfoes in the extra deck face up as material. So that's pretty cool. Then for the second Metalfoes spell is Metalfoes Fusion. It lets you fusion summon any Metalfoes fusion monster from the extra deck using Metalfoes cards, from both your hand or field. It's really good. Just, one of the best fusion cards in an archetype ever printed. And its grave effect's also really nice. What it is if it's in the graveyard, you can shuffle it back into the deck, and then you draw a card. That's a once per turn effect too. So that's pretty cool. There is some nice cheeky synergy you have with that and stuff. But it's just another, really good fusion spell. Now for the traps, you're playing 2 copies of Metalfoes Counter. Metalfoes Counter is if a card or cards you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon a Metalfoes monster straight out of your deck. So that's actually really, really cool. Some of the best targets for that are going to be Bismugear, obviously, and then Vanisher. So like if you go first and you make your board and your opponent on their turn is breaking apart your field and whatnot, and you have a set counter in the back row, you can activate the counter at resolution and either special summon a Bismugear to either protect yourself from getting OTK'd, and then when they kill it, it's going to float anyway. Or you go into a card like Vanisher, which is a 2900 beater, which banishes a monster on their field or grave on summon. Because like I said, whenever it's special summoned by a Metalfoes card, it triggers, including this. So that's actually really crazy that you can go into stuff like this off the counter. And then the counter has a secondary effect where you can banish it from the graveyard to add a Metalfoes card that's face up in your extra deck to your hand. So during that tournament, I was playing against the Dragon Link player. I actually activated Bismugear. I had already had a counter in the graveyard. I activated Bismugear from hand. He chained a Twin Twisters to pop the Bismugear in another card I controlled. Bismugear's effect, he went to the extra deck, it triggered to float. And then what I did was I banished the counter from the graveyard to just add the Bismugear back to hand, and then reactivated the Bismugear anyway because it's only a solve once per turn. So it was super crazy. Like he ended up just negging himself a Twin Twisters, and I ended up going plus regardless because the Bismugear did get popped. So at the end phase, I still got my search, and I was still actually able to reactivate it as a scale. So that was pretty clean. So Counter is a really good card. It has 2 really great effects, and that's why I played it 2 of. And then the last Metalfoes card I'm playing, in the main deck at least, is 1 copy of Metalfoes Counter. Metalfoes Counter is okay. Its first effect is whatever. You never really use it in this deck. In pure Metalfoes it makes more sense, but in this hybrid it doesn't come up that much. The secondary effect though is really good, where if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you get to add a Metalfoes monster from deck to hand. So that's pretty nice. So even if it's sent to the field to the graveyard, even while it's set, it still triggers. So you can easily get a free search off of this thing, like during your combos. And I'll get into how I'm sending it to the grave shortly, but it's a really good card to play at 1 of. So that wraps up the Metalfoes lineup of this deck. Now what we're going to be getting into is just like the generic like extenders and like the few random cards I'm playing that help this deck consistency. We're going to be playing 1 Despot 001, or Despot 1. This, obviously, for those of you that don't know, is going to be part of the Crystron Halka Fibrax and Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon combo. And I'll get into that, how that works once I talk about the extra deck. This card's just really cool. It's a level 1 machine tuner. It gains 500 attack for each machine monster on the board. I mean, whatever, you don't really use it for that, but its grave effect is nice, where if 2 or more machines are special summoned at once, you can revive this card from the graveyard to the field for free. So that comes up during your Mecha Phantom Beast combo, where when you summon the Link monster Mecha Phantom Beast, it summons out a bunch of Mecha Phantom Beast tokens, and then this card can actually special itself from the graveyard back to board, and then you go off from there. Alternatively, though, if you end up setting up a Pendulum Scale with the Metalfoes cards, and you pen summon like an Auto Navigator and like a Hang On Mach, that's considered 2 machines being special summoned at once. So that actually does trigger the Despot if it's engraved already, which is kind of nice. So playing pens in this deck is just kind of cool. Then you play your one Mecha Phantom Beast Aerosguin, or Penguin as I like to call it. This is probably the only brick in the deck. This is the one card in the whole deck you don't ever want to draw. If you do draw it, it feels really bad because then you can't combo, since the Mecha Phantom Beast Link can only special summon Mecha Phantom Beast cards from the deck and not your hand. However, another way around that is, again, assuming you have a Pendulum Scale set up, you're able to pen summon this card from the hand. So assuming you have access to a pen scale, it's not the worst thing. But if you draw this and you don't have access to a pen scale, it's the worst feeling in the world. What this card does, though, is it can banish a Mecha Phantom Beast from grave to special summon a Mecha Phantom Beast token to your field. And then again, while you control a Mecha Phantom Beast token, he can't be destroyed with battle card effects, whatever. You don't really care about that. What you do care about is this card's level becomes the combined level of all Mecha Phantom Beast tokens on field. So while you control him in a Mecha Phantom Beast token, for example, if it's just one token, his level becomes 6 because he's already a level 3, and then he gains levels equal to the combined levels of all the tokens on the board. So even if you just control one token, he's actually a level 6 card. So it's almost like a non-tuner that modulates its level, similar to how Auto Navigator is a tuner that modulates its level. So there's a lot of like really cool like interactions you have with some of these cards that allow you to make some really cool synchro plays. So one copy of that. Next up is going to be 2 copies of Magician Souls. Now again, I'm sorry, I'm going to be honest with you guys, you should be playing 3 of this. I'm not playing 3 because I simply can't afford the 3rd copy. So whatever, cards are expensive, right? Yu-Gi-Oh shouldn't be this much, but it is. So just 2 copies of Souls. You should play 3, but I don't have the 3rd, unfortunately. I do apologize for that. However, even at 2, I still saw this card very often during my games in that tourney at my locals. This card was like glued to my hand, and it's really insane. What you do is you can dump a level 6 or higher spellcaster from deck to grave, special summon this card from your hand, and then while it's on the field, you can send up to 2 spells and traps from either your hand or field to the graveyard to draw that many cards. So this is kind of one of the ways that I can actually combo off with a combination, where I can have a combination set on the field off of a Metalfoes scale effect, for example, and then I can use the souls to send the combination to grave to draw a card, and then because combination was sent from field to grave, I get a search on top of it. So that's really cool. Souls is just a really nice extender overall. Helps me make my Halka Fibrax, helps me go into all kinds of synchro plays and whatnot. It's just a really good card to have. Unfortunately, though, I only do have 2 copies of it. So I am going to be working on getting the 3rd. And when I do, I will be updating this profile because there is some things that will be changing with this deck. I just wanted to get the profile out right now since I, won that, or I didn't win. I came 2nd place at that locals last week, and I didn't want to wait too long before uploading the deck profile of the deck that I used. Anyway, the next card is going to be 1 copy of Chronograph Sorcerer. This is my Magician Souls target that I send, from deck to grave to special the souls. However, this card is pretty cool in this deck because it's actually not a brick if you draw it. This card's, you're never going to use the pendulum effect ever. It just doesn't come up. And I don't even have the time gazer to summon anyway. But it is an 8 scale, so it's a high scale at least. If you're in a pinch, you could technically scale it if you needed a high scale that badly. However, what I actually use this card for if I draw it is the monster effect it has. If a card or cards I control gets destroyed by battle or by card effect, I can special summon this card from my hand, and then I can also special summon another monster from my hand if I do that. So it's actually really cool, especially given that I'm playing Metalfoes. Since the Metalfoes like to target stuff and destroy it, like my field spells, for example. If I use Bismugear to blow up a field spell, this card can special summon itself. Then I can special summon another monster out of my hand, and then I get to set a card off the Bismugear effect, and then the field spell I blew up gets me a search anyway. So, this card ends up becoming like a really nice extender. So it's pretty cool to play in this deck for that reason, and that's why I'm running it as my Magician Souls target. Then, Next, you're going to be playing 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. You could be playing 3, again, for the same reason I'm playing 2 Souls. I just couldn't afford the 3rd Ash. Ash is, for whatever reason, really expensive right now, even for like the common versions. So I just was able to get my hands on 2 Ash prior to going to the locals, and it worked out. I mean, Ash is a hard once per turn anyway, so like seeing multiple copies of it just feels bad since you can't use them all. So I feel like a 2 is fine. You know, you see it just enough. It's a 41 card deck, so it's not like, you know, the deck's 60 cards and you're just never going to see this. So I think a 2 is fine. However, I would maybe consider playing 3 of it if I was going to be changing the deck up moving forward. But again, that's up to you. I mean, you don't even have to play Ash. This is kind of just a flex spot. You could play whatever you want in this slot. Me personally, I just had 2 Ashes lying around, so I was able to put these in the deck, and it worked out just fine as a pretty good catch-all hand trap. Then next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Where Art Thou. Where Art Thou is a really cool spell card. If I control a level 1 monster, I can add a level 1 monster from the deck to my hand. However, at the end phase of the turn, I'll take 2,000 damage to my life points if I didn't normal summon a monster with the added monster's name. I play some really good level 1s in this deck, in case you didn't notice. Bismugear is a level 1. Magician Souls is a level 1. And the F.A. Auto Navigator is a level 1 as well. So basically, if I have any of these monsters on my field, in my monster zone, I can activate Where Art Thou and then search any of these 3. So like, for example, if I have an Auto Nav and I activate Where Art Thou, I can search a Bismugear or a Souls. Or if I have the Souls, I can activate Where Art Thou and then search an Auto Nav. So like, it's really cool, like the interactions you have. And ironically, even though I'm only playing 2 copies of Souls, playing the Where Art Thous kind of makes it feel like I'm playing 4 Souls technically, since I have 2 other ways to search it. So you play 2 Souls and 2 Where Art Thous, which are kind of like pseudo Souls anyway if you need them. But realistically, you still want to play 3 Souls. I just don't have the 3rd one, so I do apologize. So 2 Where Art Thou, it's pretty cool. And also something else to note, this card is not once per turn. So like if you activate this and it gets ashed and you have a second one in your hand, you can still hard activate the second copy. So that's pretty cool too. And then the last card I was playing in the main deck is just 1 Super Polymerization. Kind of random, I know. I just had this card, and I thought it was pretty good because there actually are a couple of Metalfoes Fusions in the extra deck that are pretty generic that you can Super Poly into using your opponent's stuff, so that's kind of nice. Again, if you're going to like double down on Super Polying your opponent's stuff, you want to max out on this and play 3. I just didn't have the 2nd or 3rd copies. I only have the 1 at my disposal, so that's what I went. And it never came up anyway. I never saw this card, obviously, and it just didn't come up anyway. So this is a huge flex spot. You don't have to run this if you don't want to. You can cut this and put whatever you want in its place, but this is what I took to that event, and I wound up taking 2nd regardless. So that's the main deck. It's 41 cards in total, F.A. Metalfoes. Pretty cool, again. And now we're going to dive into the extra deck, because I do play some pretty cool stuff in that too. So we're going to start off with the 1 copy of F.A. Dawn Dragster. Again, generic level 7 synchro monster. Other decks play this card just for the fact that it's a generic synchro that negates spells and traps, which is good. However, this card in FAs is crazy because you're actually able to capitalize the fact that it's an FA card since you're playing FA support. So like whenever you activate the field spells, this card is gaining levels. It gets huge. You can like give it targeting protection. There's just a lot you can do with this thing. Obviously, it has the effect where it can gain 1 level each time an FA spell trap or spell trap effect is activated, and then it gains 300 attack times this level. And then you can, when a spell trap or spell trap effect is activated, you can reduce this card's level by 2, and then negate the activation and destroy that card. So this card is just a really nice catch-all, really good spell trap negation, and pretty hard for a lot of decks to deal with, especially when it's like super high level and like has protection. It's just really difficult to get around. Next is 1 copy of Wind Pegasus Ignister. This card's also really good. It's another generic level 7 synchro. It's also a wind attribute, which is cool, so it does have some synergy with the deck. But basically what it is you can target spells and traps your opponent controls up to the number of Ignister monsters you control, including a cop itself, and destroy them. So pretty much when you make this, it's a 1-for-1 trade. You summon this, activate the effect, and you get to take out 1 spell trap on the opponent's field. Alternatively, though, if this card's effect could pop spells and traps on your field as well, it would actually be pretty insane in this deck, because then you can just use it to blow up your own field spells too, which is nice, but whatever. I guess I'm just asking for too much, but it does have a really nice graveyard effect where if a card or cards I control is destroyed by battle or card effects, and this card's in the grave, I can banish it from the graveyard and then target a card on my opponent's field and shuffle it back into the deck. So it's really nice disruption, and again, since Yu-Gi-Oh players tend to not read cards, it can easily catch your opponent off guard. If you had made this earlier, like in the game, and like on turn 3 or 4, for example, they end up like destroying something on you have, and you can banish this from the graveyard and target a card they have and just shuffle it back. It really hurts them in the long run. So it's a cool card to have. Next is 1 copy of Cyberse Quantum Dragon, another generic level 7 synchro. It has 2 effects. The first effect is a little situational and kind of niche. It's one of those effects where if you have it online, it's great, but if you don't really care about it. And what that effect is while I control a link monster on the field, while this card's on the board, the opponent cannot target other monsters for attacks except this card. And they also cannot target other monsters with card effects except this card. So he kind of like lightning rods himself, which is cool. Again, but that's a really situational effect. It doesn't always come up. The real reason why I'm playing this is for the secondary effect. And that effect is when this card declares an attack, or I'm sorry, when this card battles, excuse me, so whether it declares an attack or something is attacking him, he can shuffle or return that card to the hand. And then if you do, this card can make a second attack in a row. So it's really good because it's non-target, non-destruction removal. So like a card like this can actually deal with something like Dragoon, assuming you baited its negation, obviously. But it's really nice to deal with cards that are like usually really annoying to deal with. Like I said, you just make this, enter battle phase. Whatever you battle into, it just bounces it back to the hand, and then the card can attack again anyway. So it's a really cool card to have. Really nice level 7 generic synchro to play. Then we're playing 1 copy of Psy-Framlord Omega. Omega's really cool too. It's a level 8 light psychic, generic materials to make. Once per turn during the main phase, quick effect, you can banish this card from the field and then banish a card from your opponent's hand face up until the following standby, which is nice. So it like dodges removal and rips cards out of the opponent's hand, which is pretty cool. And then the secondary effect is nice, which is during the opponent's standby phase, you can target a banished card and put it back in the graveyard. So it's a nice way to recycle like your F.A. quick play spells and whatnot, including like your Metalfoes trap, like the Metalfoes Counter. So it's really cool. And then the last effect is kind of situational, but if it's in the graveyard, you can target himself and any of the card in grave and shuffle them back into the deck. That only comes up against like the Dogmatica matchup, along with Wind Pegasus, because if you're playing against Dogmatica and they drop a Maximus on you and they use Maximus's effect, I usually send these 2 cards to grave to really punish the opponent, which is cool. So just 1 copy of Omega. Then we're going to be playing the 1 copy of Hi-Speedroid Kitedrake. Kitedrake's an insane blowout card. It's a card that is definitely going to prompt a response from the opponent. And it's cool because even though it's not a generic synchro, it does require specific materials, which is 1 wind machine tuner and then a non-tuner. There's not very many decks outside of Speedroid that can make this. It just so happens that F.A. plays a wind machine tuner, so I'd be stupid to not play this card because it's absolutely insane. It's got 2 effects. The first effect is you can, when it's synchro summoned, you can activate one of the following. You can either destroy all other cards on the field, so it's a complete board nuke, or you can negate the effects of all face-up cards the opponent controls. So that's a full blanket negation, and that's permanent. It's not even like to the end of the turn or like the next standby phase. It's a permanent negation of all their face-up cards they currently control. That also includes back row as well. So this is one of those cards that when it gets synchro summoned, if your opponent has a response, they have to respond to this. Otherwise, they're either getting blown out or their entire board is getting like dark rulered, basically. So this card is just really insane. And the secondary effect is if it's destroyed by a card effect, or by battle, I can add a Speedroid card from deck to hand. I don't play any other Speedroids in the main deck, so it never really comes up, but the first 2 effects are just really insane. So it's a really good level 8 synchro to play. Next up is 1 copy of Borreload Savage Dragon. Probably the best generic level 8 synchro in the game. When it's synchro summoned, you get to target a link monster in your graveyard, equip it to himself. He gains the attack equal to half the attack of the equipped monster, and then you place Borreload counters on him up to the link monster's link rating that's equipped. And then what he does with those Borreload counters is during either player's turn, quick effect, you can negate the activation of a card your opponent activates. And that's like an omni negation. So it's either monsters, spells, or traps. You can just negate anything that they try and activate once per turn, which is cool. So Borreload Savage is also really cool. Then we're playing the one copy of F.A. Motorhome Transport. This card, two things. First, Konami, please make an OTS Super of this. This is the only common card I'm playing in my extra deck, and it's really annoying. Besides the point, this card actually won me Game 2 against the Dragon Link player. I had this card at level 13 alongside an F.A. City Grand Prix, and the Dragon Link player literally like extended a handshake and scooped because he had no way to out this thing, especially with City Grand Prix on field since he couldn't target it with any effects. What this card does though is gains 300 attack times its level. It's already a level 9 inherently, so when it's summoned off the bat, it's already 2,700 attacks, which is pretty nice. And then each time an FA spell trap or spell trap effects activated, he gains a level. And then if he's level 11 or higher, he cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects. And then if he's level 13 or higher, he can target an FA monster in the graveyard and special summon it. So this card is like a house. It just gets really big and like tanky. It can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects. And then if you have a City Grand Prix on board, it can't be targeted either. So it just becomes like a really sticky monster that basically a lot of decks don't have an out for outside of like kaijuing or like very specific removal that most decks won't even have in the main deck and like only play on their side. So this card like can steal games. Like game 1, if you drop this, there's a lot of decks that probably won't have an answer to this. So that's pretty cool. Then next, you play one copy of Virtual World QB Shenshen. I play this just because it's a generic level 9 that I can make pretty easily, and it's a wind, so it does have some synergy with the deck. Basically what this card does is any card sent from the field to the graveyard gets banished. However, that's not one-sided. That's both players' fields, so it also banishes my stuff that gets sent from field to... that would be sent from field to grave, so that is a bit of a drawback, but for the most part, this card just screws with your opponent. Like against Eldritch or something like that, it's a blowout almost. Really insane. Pretty good stats for a generic synchro. And then when a battle's declared, or when I declare an attack while this card's on board, I can target a banished monster, put it back in the graveyard, which is cool. Kind of situational, but at least I have the option to. And then the last effect is, if this card's in the graveyard, I can banish 2 monsters from grave with different types and attributes, and special summon this card, which is insane. So it's literally a macro cosmos that can revive itself each turn if it's in the graveyard, and just continue putting pressure on the opponent. And since I'm playing FA and Metalfoes, I already have my 2 monsters in grave usually that are different type and attribute, because FAs are wind machines and Metalfoes are fire psychics. So it's pretty easy to banish 2 of those to revive this from the graveyard. Then the last synchro that I'm playing in the extra deck is one copy of Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. To be honest, I very rarely make this card. I mean, I have the option to, but I don't always go into it. There's actually a specific reason as to why I'm playing this, and we'll get into that when I show you guys the side deck. But it's just Trish. It's a really good synchro. When it's summoned, you banish one card from each, which is the hand, or the opponent's hand, the opponent's field, and the opponent's graveyard. So it's just a crazy card. And again, I'll explain to you why I'm actually playing this when we get to the side deck. Then, starting with the Metalfoes Fusions, play one copy of Full Metalfoes Alcahest. It's a level 1 Fire Psychic Fusion, requiring a Metalfoes monster and a normal monster. Pretty much what this card does is during the opponent's turn, quick effect, you can target an effect monster they control and equip it to this card. And then this card's defense becomes the equipped monster's attack. So it's kind of like a Snatch Steal or like a Relinquished. That's a quick effect. So like you can just like disrupt them during their turn and like take their combo pieces and stuff. It's a really good, annoying card. So yeah, I play it as a 1-of. Then I play one copy of Metalfoes Mithrilium, another really good fusion monster. Pretty much what this card does is you can activate When this the effect where you can target 2 Metalfoes cards in your graveyard, shuffle them back into your deck, and then 1 card on the board, and then bounce it back to the hand. So it's pretty good. It's not a quick effect, which if it was would make it a little bit better. But this is nice if you're going second to help break the opponent's board. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon from either the grave or face-up extra deck a Metalfoes monster that you have in either one of those places. So this is pretty good. Then you play 1 copy of Metalfoes Orichalc. Orichalc's nice. It does double piercing battle damage on anything that it battles, including any of the Metalfoes you have on the field. Like if he's on the board and you have another Metalfoes, both of them do double piercing. And then if it's sent to grave, doesn't matter how it gets there, similar to Mithrilium, you can target a card in the field and destroy it. So it's really nice as like a disruption. If the opponent deals with this, they lose out on the card anyway. Then I play this as my Super Poly target. 1 copy of Crimsonite. It just requires 1 Metalfoes monster and then 2 monsters with 3,000 or less attack. So that's actually why I'm playing Super Poly, because this is pretty generic as a Super Poly target. All you need is 1 Metalfoes and then any 2 monsters on the board with 3k or less. So Super Poly with this is kind of cheeky and pretty nice, but moving forward, I would probably cut it. And then for my 2 links, play 1 copy of Crystron Halqifibrax. Again, doesn't really need to be explained all that much. It's one of the best links in the game. When it's link summoned, you special a tuner from the deck, and it just lets you go full combo. And then I also play 1 copy of Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon, again facilitating the Hulk Auroradon combo. This card's just really nice. When it's link summoned, you special summon 3 Mecha Phantom Beast tokens, and then when those tokens are summoned, it triggers the Despot 1 engrave, and you would have had a Despot 1 because you got it off the Hulk, and then you use Hulk and the Despot to make this. And then that just facilitates your entire combo. And then his secondary effect is you contribute 2 monsters, so it's usually himself and a token, and then that's when you special summon a Mecha Phantom Beast from your deck, which in my case would be the Aerosguin that I play. So that's it for the extra deck and the main deck. Now we're gonna move on to the side deck, and this will be pretty straightforward. I play 3 copies of the Godarla Kaiju, Mystery Dust Kaiju. I play this just in case I would just win up against the Tri-Brigade Lyrolus deck, or Bird Up as it's called, because this is a wind attribute. So if they lock you into the wind barrier statue, you actually have a way to deal with it with this card. So this is pretty good. So that's why I played 3 copies of this. And also it's just a Kaiju. It just deals with anything that's really annoying. Things like Dragoon, any other link, you know, like Mech Knight, Avermax, stuff like that. Played triple copies of Dark Ruler No More. This card was insane against the Dragon Link player. Obviously, he would make his board go full combo, and then on my turn I drop this, and he basically extends the handshake. Dark Ruler is really, really good this format, and I would highly suggest you pick up your playsets if you don't already have them. Then I played triple copies of Twin Twisters for any back row decks that I run into. Twin Twisters is a really nice blowout card, and I can even use it to pop my own field spells, which is nice, and go plus that way as well. So Twin Twisters is nice. Then I also play 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. Again, insane blowout card against back row decks. Destroys all spells and traps the opponent controls, so can't really argue with that. 1 Call by the Grave in the side. To be honest, this card needs to come back to 3. I really don't see a reason why this is at 1. Konami needs to kind of get their shit together and put this card at 3. It's insane. It's in the side deck only because I feel like it's a pretty sacky in the main. I only side this into the main deck if I'm going up against like a graveyard-based strategy like Eldritch. Outside of that, I never really put like side into it. So then I play 2 evenly matched. You could play 3 actually, and you should. I just don't have a 3rd for the same reason I don't have a 3rd Ash and a 3rd Souls, because evenly matched is expensive, and all I could get was 2 right now. So 2 evenly matched. However, moving forward, I would probably play the 3rd one in the side. Then for my other Super Poly target, I actually play a brand new card, Parametalfoes Azortless. This came out in the most recent booster set, Blazing Vortex. Its effects don't really matter all that much. It's basically just used as a Super Poly target because of its materials. It requires a Metalfoes monster and then a fusion. So like, since I play Super Poly in the main deck, you can actually Super Poly stuff like Dragoon, like Invoke Nekaba, you know, Shadal Winda, things like that, and go into this. So it's pretty cool. So against like matchups like those, I'll side into this since I play the Super Poly in the main. and it gives me access, to clear cards like that using Super Poly. So it's pretty cool. And then the last side deck card I play, and one of the main reasons why I'm playing Trishula in the extra deck, is because I'm playing the brand new Trish that just came out in the Ice Barrier structure deck, Trishula Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This card's insane. It's a level 11 Stinkroll. I usually side this in going second, because this card is a blowout. There's a really easy combo that I can pull off where I can make this pretty easily. And when it's summoned, I can banish 3 cards the opponent controls. And that's non-target, non-destruction, so that's crazy. And then if the opponent deals with this, or like they destroy it by battle or card effect, I can actually special summon the original Trishula from the extra deck or graveyard. That Trish's attack becomes 3,300, and then the entire field gets negated. So like it's really cool. Like I side deck this. I put it in the extra when I know I'm going second. And if I make this, it's just a really crazy blowout card. So that's the side deck for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the deck profile. Like I said, I took second place at my locals last weekend with this deck. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Hopefully you like and subscribe. And I will be posting more FA content coming up soon. So stay tuned.